Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. My name is General Confusion, and we're not playing Dominions 5 in this video, but we are talking about it. A couple of people asked me about some questions about a strategy that they thought would like me to talk about. And so today I'm going to talk about boosting, because effective use of boosters and boosting through magic paths to get access to high-level spells is definitely one of the things that separates effective Dominions players from Dominions players who often kind of get wiped out. So boosting is the process of forging items and summoning commanders to effectively ratchet your nation up the levels of a magic path. So, you know, a lot of nations, if we look at, say, I was looking up Lava Warriors a minute ago, but if we look at, say, let's look at early age Tianqi. And you can see all the units that they have available that they can recruit here. I'll actually swap that to recruitable real quick so you can see only the ones they can actually recruit. You'll see that Tianqi has a lot of paths available, like their Masters of the Five Elements, their Celestial Masters. They have almost every path. In fact, with the Master of Dead, I think they have every path except Blood. But none of them are at a high level. Celestial Masters get 2 randoms, but they don't come in the same paths. So at most, a Celestial Master ends up getting 2 in a given path, except Water, at which they can get 3. They might get another 10% random, but you really can't count on that, so I wouldn't even think about it. Masters of the Five Elements can never get more than 2 in one of their paths, otherwise they're stuck at 1. So you look at these things and you think, well, okay, but there are a lot of spells in the game that require more than 1 or 2 or 3, like, you know, Manifest Vitriol requires a specific cross path that you might be able to cast, but Manifestation that requires 5 death, or even Summon Manticore that requires 2 nature and 2 earth. How do you get to these kinds of things if you don't have natively powerful mages? Well, the answer is boosting. There's 2 kinds of boosting: summoning units that have higher paths than you do, or have equal paths and then can be boosted further, and boosting with items. Boosting with items is by far the most common. It's of differing difficulty depending on what path you're talking about, what path of magic, because different paths of magic have different boosters available at different levels. So I've got the, I'm on the Dominions 5 mod inspector, of course, and I've got it sorted so that I'm looking at all items, only the generic ones, not the special national items, up to construction level 6, so we're leaving out the unique artifacts that you can't count on getting. We're only looking at the generic general purpose items. And I'm just going to go through these paths real quick and talk about how you can boost them effectively. First off, the items that boost every single path are the Ring of Wizardry and the Robe of the Magi. Forging the Ring of Wizardry takes very high level Astral. Forging a Robe of the Magi takes very high level Air and very high level Blood. In either case, these items will give the mage who's equipped with them +1 path in every single path they have. However many they have, the Ring of Wizardry and the Robe of the Magi will boost it. That doesn't, of course, in order to forge them, you have to already have these paths available. So usually, in order to forge a Ring of Wizardry, you have to build a Pretender to be able to do it. Usually, in order to forge a Robe of the Magi, you have to build a Pretender to do it, or you have to empower and boost a lot in order to get there. You have to have, like, I think Vanheim could theoretically get here just by equipping boosters, maybe, if they get the right randoms on a Vanjar, on their cap-only, slow-to-recruit Air Blood Mage. Possibly, because I think they can start with 2 in each or something, but it's going to be tricky. So, since we're already on Air, let's start with Air. And Air is actually one of the hardest paths to boost. Item-wise, your lowest level booster already requires Air 4, and it's the Winged Helmet. It's expensive, it takes 25 gems, and all it does is give you head protection and increase your air magic by +1. If you've got Air 4, though, you can forge the Winged Helmet, then you can forge the Bag of Winds, which is even more expensive. But it gives you both the air boost and it gives you a lesser air elemental, so it's kind of a handy item to have. It's not really worth 40 gems for an air elemental, but it is worth it for the air boost. After that, that gets you up to Air 6, and Air 6 is actually high enough to cast almost any spell in the game. So if we look at just air spells, and we'll look at only rituals, the only air ritual, the only air summon or anything that costs more than air 6 is Fata Morgana. And Fata Morgana honestly isn't all that good in the first place, so I wouldn't hardly even bother worrying about that. With air 6, you can cast any of the other generic air spells. You can cast Perpetual Storm to get storms in every battle. You can cast Phantasmal Attack if you want that. You can cast all of the summons. You can summon the Queens of Elemental Air. And honestly, getting Queens of Elemental Air is the only real reason you would want to boost air that high in the first place. When it comes to combat spells, air does have some spells, some valuable spells that are relatively high level. Mists of Deception is pretty solid, although expensive, and Shimmering Fields is the highest level air evocation, and it does quite a bit of damage. So there's that. If you want those, then boosting up to air 6 makes sense. But to do so, you have to start at air 4. You don't have a lower level air booster than that. This is all the generic items that boost air right here. If you go up to artifacts, you do have the Tome of High Power. Now the problem with this is the Tome of High Power is unique, so you have to be the first one there and the first one to forge it. It only requires 2 air and 2 astral, which is easier to get for some nations. The other strategy is to go up to Construction 6 and forge one of the Staffs of Elemental Mastery, which are kind of a key in a lot of boosting strategies because they allow you to boost a path that you don't necessarily have. If you have like an air 3 mage, but you can somehow get water 4 and fire 4, you could forge a Staff of Elemental Mastery, boost up to air 4, and then work your way up that way. That's one strategy. But once again, you already have to have fairly high paths in the first place. There are some factions for whom getting this is much easier. I'm thinking particularly of Mekone and Phlegra, who have Cyclops that have fire randoms and water randoms, and Master Smith, which makes it easier for them to forge items. They can forge this Staff of Elemental Mastery natively without having to build a pretender to do it. Most factions have to build a pretender to forge any of these 4. Or the Ring of Wizardry, the Ring of Sorcery, which doesn't show here because it's not an air booster. Summon-wise, there aren't many air commander summons. There's the Queen of Elemental Air, which summons a level 5 air mage. Beyond that, it's pretty much just units. You don't really get air commanders that you can summon. There is a nature summon that summons an air mage, which is Fairy Court. That summons a Fairy Queen who has 3 air. So if you don't have much or any air at all, but you do have nature, you can break into air by summoning a Fairy Queen at Conjuration level 8, so fairly late in the game, very late in the game in fact. And then boost or empower her 1 path somehow in order to get the Winged Helmet and then the Bag of Wind. But that's... Other than that, breaking into air is hard if you don't have any. You can also do it through death, I believe, because I think Spectral Mages... Nope, Spectral Mages don't even have an air random. I was wrong. So yeah, air is hard to get into. I don't remember off the top of my head if there's another unit that will do it. But in general, if you don't have good air magic, you don't try to get into air magic, specifically because it's hard and there's not a whole lot of payoff at the higher levels. Water, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. Water is the easiest path to boost in the game, and that's because of this item, the Water Bracelet. It's a water booster that only takes water 1 and 5 water gems. So, if you have a water 2 mage, you can go up to as high as you need in water. If you have a water 1 mage, you get stuck at water 2 until you can find a water 2 mage. But water 2 mages aren't all that hard to find, and since there's not a huge amount of competition for what to do with water gems, generally speaking, if you can get to water 2, you can empower somebody. So the way you do it is you have a water 2 mage, you forge a water bracelet, put it on him, that makes him water 3, you forge a robe of the sea and put it on, that makes him water 4. Then you cast Sea King's Court. You can actually do this at water 3, you don't even have to be water 4 for it. That gets you a Sea King who is natively water 3 and also generates a water gem every turn. You put the Robe of the Sea and the Water Bracelet on him, that makes him water 5. Then he can cast Queen of Elemental Water, and Queen of Elemental Water summons Water 5 mages. And the Water 5 mages have full slots, so then you can put the items on them, and they kick you up all the way to Water 7. At Water 7, once again, you can cast every water spell. In fact, you can cast every water spell. I don't think there are any water spells that require Water 8. Let's look at combat spells. I don't think so. Nope. Nothing that requires Water 8. The highest you ever actually need is Water 5. There is... What am I clicking on? There is one ritual that requires Water 6 and one that requires Water... Yeah, there's one that requires Water 7, Vengeful Water. And there's Allure of the Deep. But neither of these spells are honestly worth it, and if you're usually not going to go that high in Thaumaturgy in any case. In terms of other water summons, once again, there's not a huge number of commanders. Water does let you summon Bishop Fish, which are Holy 3. So if you don't have native Holy 3 units, summoning Bishop Fish can be pretty important when it comes to winning the game. In order to do that, you have to have Water 3 magic, and you have to get underwater. So you need to have a Water 2 mage from somewhere in order to boost yourself up to Water 3. But like I said, that's fairly easy. You can summon Asp Turtles. They're just a unit, though. They're not a commander. And yeah, I think the only real commanders you get in water are Sea King's Court, Bishop Fish, and the Queens of Elemental Water. You do get a bunch of cool units for fighting underwater, but beyond that, water is pretty much a battlefield path and not a fantastic one. Boosting Earth is also relatively simple, at least when it comes to getting up to useful battlefield levels. If you have Earth 2 is the breakpoint. If you have level 2 Earth, you can forge Earth Boots. Earth Boots push you up to level 3. At level 3, you can summon Earth Power to kick yourself up to level 4 on the battlefield. When it comes to boosting up to high-level Earth for combat purposes, most of the time your option is to spend gems. Ritual-wise, you can summon a Troll King who has Earth 3. So if you have an Earth 2, you can boost up to Earth 3, summon a Troll King, hand him Earth Boots to make him Earth 4. That gets you up a little higher. It doesn't get you to the Kings of Elemental Earth, which are the equivalent Earth summon to the Water Queens and the Air Queens. In order to do that, you can either have a Pretender or you have to go into cross-path boosters. So the Staffs of Elemental Mastery, of course, will do it. If you have Blood, Bloodstones will do it, and Bloodstones are pretty valuable for this reason. Since Earth is a strong path, and high-level Earth can be very rewarding, if there's a Blood Nation in the game, even if you're not a Blood Nation, it can often be worth trading for a Bloodstone in order to boost. Or if you can get a hold of Blood Slaves somewhere, it may even be worth setting up a small blood economy to generate Bloodstones for yourself. Bloodstones are not only good boosters, they also give you a temporary Earth gem in every battle, which means you get a free Maws of the Earth or a free Earth Elemental or something. So they're very, very solid. Then, of course, you have the Staffs, and you have the Robe of the Magi, the Ring of Wizardry. All of those will also boost Earth. But if you start with Earth 2, you can work your way up. If you can get a hold of a Bloodstone, you can get the Kings of Elemental Earth, and that's pretty much all you need. The reason why you might want Earth 6 is to cast Earthblood Deep Well, but if you can get a King of Elemental Earth, then he can cast Earthblood Deep Well. So that's about all you have to worry about there. It is often worth building a Pretender with Earth already, at least 3 or 4. If you build a Pretender with 4 Earth, then you have no problem getting to Earthblood Deep Well, and you also have access to all kinds of cool other Earth items. That sometimes require, like the Gate Cleaver requires Earth 3, the Iron Face requires Earth 4. They're situational, but possibly useful. And then there's lots of items that require relatively low-level Earth with cross paths that you might want. So, I just changed over to a different path, but that's fine. Astral is one of the most important paths in the game in a lot of ways, because it allows communions, and because its cross paths often have very, very useful and interesting spells and items in them. Astral Boosting is fairly simple at a low level because you have the Starshine Skullcap. That can kick you up to Astral 3. After Astral 3, you need an Earth cross path in order to get the Crystal Coin. If you can get those two together, then you're in business. Now you have Astral 4. After that, the Ring of Sorcery, which only boosts these 4 paths, Astral, Death, Nature, and Blood, requires Astral 6. But if you can get up to Astral 6 somehow to forge the ring, then you can forge the Ring of Wizardry by putting the Ring of Sorcery on, and then you have just ultimate boosting power over everything. Spell-wise, Astral has cross-path summons, but it doesn't actually have many single-path summons. It has the Telistic Animate, which is a priest, but not an Astral Mage. It has Divine Name, which can make a mindless creature a commander. And it has Juggernaut Construction, which spreads Dominion. But in terms of boosting Astral through summons, you're going to have a hard time. I have not played a ton with Astral, so I don't know much about boosting Astral, to be fully honest. Most of the time, if I'm going to play with high-level Astral magic, I'm just going to build a Pretender that can do it. If you build a Pretender with about 4 levels of Astral, then he can boost his way up to forge the rings, and that will give you all the Astral magic you could ever want. There are a few other Astral items that work in combat. The Banner of the Northern Star is one that casts Light of the Northern Star that improves everybody's Astral magic automatically. The Crystal Shield is another. It casts Power of the Spheres, which makes the guy who's carrying it more powerful in all paths of magic. So these are very powerful boosting items that only work in combat. The Crystal Shield in particular, if you have Astral Earth cross paths, forging these is a fantastic use of time because they make whoever's carrying them just way better at magic. After Astral, one of the other most powerful paths is Death. And for Death boosters... Oh, nope, sorry. Let's cycle back around to Death. For Death boosters, Death starts off traditionally with a level 2 booster, the Skull Staff, which boosts you up to Death 3. At Death 3, you can summon Mound Fiends, which are Death 3, I believe. Rituals. Yeah, you can summon a Death 3 Mound Fiend at Death 3, and then you can give him the Skull Staff, and then he's Death 4. You get stuck there, because there aren't any real high-level Death summons, and Death 4 is not enough to forge the Skull Face. One way to get around this is to have a Pretender with Death, otherwise Empowering in Death can be worth it, because high-level Death can be extremely valuable. There's all kinds of fun battlefield stuff you can do with Death, and higher-level Death lets you summon powerful, immortal thugs, Wraith Lords for one. Excuse me, nearly choked myself there. Death 3, however, is enough to summon Spectres, and Spectres are really kind of a breakpoint because Spectral Mages have 2 randoms that can break you into Astral if you don't have them, and they can random Astral Earth, which if you have access to Astral and Earth boosters already can break you into Crystal Magic. So Spectral Mages are pretty neat, especially if you don't have Astral Magic otherwise, or not much Astral otherwise. Spectral Mages have a very good chance of randoming at least 1 level of Astral, and that gives you the Astral Earth cross path, it gives you normal Astral spells. It's very, very cool, so they're worth keeping in mind. They're not very good for boosting because they get low levels, although if you do get one that randoms Astral 2 or Earth 2, he can forge the basic boosters for that path. But yeah, generally, if you don't have native Death, you'll be able to get up to Death 4 fairly consistently, but you'll get stuck there. In order to get higher than that, you have to do something. You have to take extraordinary measures, basically. It is worth getting up to Death 5 or 6, because that allows you to get Well of Misery and Wraith Lord. But for a lot of nations are never going to get there, and it's not... You shouldn't spend too much time on it. If you have Death 5, you can cast Lichcraft, which gives you a Death 4 guy that you can then boost up to be also Death 5. So that's also sometimes worth it, although he's not holy like them. He doesn't have holy magic like the Mound Fiend does. So keep that in mind. Mound Fiends are also Reanimator Priests, which is a cool little ability for them. Nature Magic. Nature is another one that's fairly easy to boost. You do, of course, have your level 2 booster, the Thistle Mace. You have a level 5 booster that gives you +2, so if you get level 5 nature, you're up to the top. You also have these other 2 boosters. You have the Armor of Twisting Thorns, which is a Blood Nature Crosspath booster, which a few nations actually have. And then you have the Moonvine Bracelet, which is a Nature Astral Crosspath boosters. So, Pangea and I believe also Mictlan and Middle-Age Xibalba have access to the Armor of Twisting Thorns pretty easily. Most blood nations do, honestly, or most nature nations, say that 5 times fast, that have any blood can get the Armor of Twisting Thorns pretty easily. The Moonvine Bracelet is fairly easily available to Arcocephali, and I don't know if there's another Nature Astral Crosspath nation. But in any case, if you have Nature, you can go Thistle Mace, one of these 2. That will kick you up to at least level 3 or 4 Nature. After that, you have to kind of stretch to get up to level 5. Nature does have a number of commander summons. I think it may have the most commander summons. Not entirely sure. But you can get Troll Shamans, which are Nature Death crosspaths, so that can help you break into Death if you don't have Death. You can get Ivy Queens. So at Nature 4, you can summon an Ivy King, who is Nature 3. If what you have is Nature 2 mages with 2 boosters, then that can kick you up to Nature 5, at which point you can forge the Tree Lord's Staff and you've broken through all obstacles. If you have Nature 3 mages holding 1 booster already, it won't actually help you, but Ivy Kings are pretty good summons, and they can summon a lot of Vine Ogres, so that's nice. You can also, of course, cast Fairy Court, but since the Fairy Queen only has level 3 nature and it costs level 5 nature to cast, not very worth it in terms of boosting. The other big one is Awaken Tree Lord. You can use Tree Lord to get you these big. They're immobile, but they're very powerful. They're excellent defensively. This Tree Lord, you get one of these 3 at random. This one gives you 5 nature, 4/5 nature. The downside is he doesn't have item slots except for miscellaneous, so he can't actually hold most boosters except the Moonvine Bracelet. I guess you just slip it on a branch somewhere. But this one breaks you into blood just a little bit, and this one gives you just a little bit of Earth Nature Crosspath, which means he can cast Strength of Gaia, which is a great little in-combat booster spell that it not only boosts your nature magic, it also gives you strength and regeneration. And Barkskin. So that's Nature. Nature level 5 is the level that you have to break past there. If you can forge Moonvine Bracelets, you can get to Nature 5, because that means you have Nature 3. If you're holding a Thistle Mace in order to forge Moonvine Bracelets, then you're in more trouble. You have to work harder to get past it. But so long as you can get 2 out of these 3, you're usually okay. Otherwise, you're probably going to have to wait until you can forge a Ring of Sorcery in order to break past the Tree Lord's Staff. Blood. Blood is one of the best boosting paths, and it's not because its boosters are low level. It's because since you get so many Blood Slaves as a Blood Nation, it's relatively easy to empower, and also because Blood has a ton of cross-path summons that you can use to break into other paths. So the lowest level Blood booster is the Blood Thorn, which is a one-handed weapon. It does cost construction 6, but it only takes 3 levels of blood. So basically, as a Blood Nation, what happens is you hunt for a whole bunch of Blood Slaves while you get up to construction 6, then you empower some random guy once, who starts with level 2, and you start forging Blood Thorns and pretty much never stop. Brazen Vessels actually come earlier, but they require a lot higher level blood. If you have a Blood Pretender, then Brazen Vessels can get you kicked up pretty quick. If not, you have to wait. Armor of Souls, similarly. Armor of Souls is only construction level 2. It requires a ton of slaves, but it not only gives you blood magic, it gives you a huge magic resistance buff. So if you have any blood at all, it is worth forging these, for your thugs even. Putting these things on thugs makes them much harder to kill with astral magic. Spells, though, are where blood kind of shines. Blood summons include the Heliophaguses, or the Heliophagi, who are blood... They're all unique. So they all have different paths. But you've got Blood Death cross paths, Blood Fire cross paths, and just straight blood magic. In particular, Gorillon and Amaimon are important because they give you level 4 in their respective paths. So Gorillon by himself breaks you into death because he has enough death to forge himself a skull staff, carry it, and then forge himself a skull face, which kicks him up to death 6. Amaimon kicks you up into fire in a big way because he lets you forge the basic fire booster. And we'll talk about fire in just a minute here. But so those two are very important for boosting those particular paths if you can get them. They are unique, so if you're in a game with another Blood Nation, you are in a race for these guys. The other ones are... got the Heliophagi. What are the other ones? Why isn't this showing me the Frost Devils? Because there is a... yes, the Ice Devils. I'm not sure why they weren't showing up. They are blood-governed spells. You can also get these Ice Devils, which break you into water, death, astral. They have a couple of useful cross paths. They're not quite as high level, so they're not as useful. Like, Bune won't break you into death in the same way that the Heliophagus will. But breaking into astral with Bifrons can be very, very useful, so keep that in mind. And then at the highest levels, you have the Demon Lords. And the Demon Lords all have great cross paths. They're hugely, hugely expensive, and they don't come until Blood 9. So by the time you're casting these spells, you're already in the end game. Given that, might not be as useful as some of the others just because they come so late. Heliophagus also has that problem. It comes at Blood 8. But if you are a Blood primary nation, you're probably researching Blood harder than anybody else is researching any single school. So you should be able to make it. The Demon Lords, Pazuzu gives you air in a big way, which is nice. Belphegor gives you fire and earth. Belial gives you fire and nature. Buer gives you fire and a little bit of death. Not enough death to actually boost death. Gurion gives you nature, and Ashmedai gives you fire and astral. So they're all quite useful. Also, Ashmedai gives you blood slaves per turn. Gurion gives you... they all have very, very interesting and powerful special abilities. And, of course, they're all super combatant chassis. So, all worth summoning. All worth 150 blood slaves. It's just they come so late and you have to have blood level 8 in order to cast them. Getting blood level 8 means, like, you started with a high-level blood pretender, and you're wearing the Armor of Souls, and you're carrying a Blood Thorn and a Brazen Vessel, and you've probably empowered once. Or you're wearing a Ring of Sorcery. So in other words, it's a huge investment. But, can be worth it. Oh, by the way, Armor of Twisting Thorns, note that. It's unremovable. Once you put it on, it never comes off. So don't put it on anyone who you want to ever wear anything else. Just keep that in mind. Holy Magic. Holy Magic is unique in that it is technically a path of magic, but it is impossible to boost unless you go up to construction level 8, where you have 3 unique artifacts that will boost Holy. The Immaculate Shield, which is a Fire Astral Cross Path, the Sword of Justice, which is a Fire Astral Cross Path, and the Sword of Injustice, which is a Death item. So if you have Death, you can actually boost Holy, and you can take a Holy 2 guy and make him Holy 3, which makes him able to claim thrones. But usually this won't happen. I mean, usually people don't go for Construction 8 in multiplayer games. The rewards aren't really, in my mind, worth it for the research. You might go to Construction 7 in order to get Weapons of Sharpness, but that's about as far as I would probably go, generally speaking. Now, Fire. Fire is... Fire's kind of tricky, because Fire does have a low-level booster, but it's a weird crosspath. It's Fire-Death crosspath. Now, if you're a big Fire nation, I would recommend taking Fire and Death somehow, on your Pretender if you have to, because being able to forge Skulls of Fire is a huge boost. You don't have another booster until you get up to level 4, at which point you get the Flame Helmet. And after that, it's all multi-purpose boosters. There are no other single-purpose Fire boosters. that's generally speaking okay, because you don't need high-level fire. Level 5 lets you summon the King of Elemental Fire, one of them, Ruax or Pyriflogos, and one of them can wear a fire hat in order to cast Eternal Pyre if you want to do that. Level 5 also lets you cast Vapor Flames. It doesn't let you cast Purgatory, but Purgatory is a very niche and not very useful ritual. Beyond that, the only other high-level ritual is Second Sun, and I've never cast Second Sun, and I don't think I've ever been in a game where Second Sun was cast, and I'm not sure under what circumstances it would be cast. I mean, it's kind of an apocalypse spell. It's like a spell that, if you've taken Heat 3 and you're a big Fire Nation, you might want to cast it, but basically the cross-section of that is Abyssia. So if you're Abyssia, sometimes you want to cast Second Sun, and under no other circumstances that I can think of off the top of my head. Also, combat-wise, Fire 5 is high enough to do everything. It's high enough to cast Firestorm, which is the top of the heap for fire spells. Fire spells overall tend to be pretty low path. Fire 3 will get you almost all of them. Fire 4 will get you Living Fire, which is and Flaming Arrows. And Flaming Arrows can actually be cast by a Fire 2 mage by summoning Phoenix Power and then spending 2 gems. Living Fire needs a Fire 3 mage, I believe, but it's still not that bad. So you don't need high-level fire, you don't need to boost it much. Just having access to the Skull of Fire will do it for you. The Skull of Fire and the Flame Helmet will give you enough for all of your fire boosting needs, generally speaking. And then maybe you'll forge a Staff of Elemental Mastery or 2 and use it for fire as well as everything else. And that should be all of them, I believe. Air, Water, Earth, Astral, Death, Nature, Blood, Holy, and Fire. Yep, that's it. So, boosting-wise, items are, of course, the most important. However, you can't overlook summons. I have not talked about all the summons. I've only talked about the very basic ones. There are some others out there, generally often on odd cross paths, like, for example, what is it? Where's the... Alright, let's find it this way. Sometimes this thing is a little bit hard to use. We're looking in summons. Lamia Queens. Lamia Queens are a Nature Death crosspath summon that get you randoms in Water and Blood. So in order to break into Blood, if you don't have much, Lamia Queens can be a good summon if you have access to them. All that kind of weird stuff. There's a lot of those to explore and to kind of find. Spectral Mages, like I said, are one very key summon for Death Nations. Vampire Lords. Curse of Blood gives you Vampire Lords that have death and blood magic that you can spam everywhere, and also they're immortal, so they never die. So that's really useful. It doesn't help you boost much because you already have to have death and blood in order to cast it, but having more death and blood to spread around is always handy, and it lets you get more summons out. Father Ill'Earth is a blood summon that it requires 3 blood and 4 earth, and it gives you 3 blood and 4 earth, so you can use that to boost earth if you want to. There's lots of these different kinds of weird cross-path boosters that you could just kind of have to experiment and find. But, in general, getting up a path, like I said, is dependent on items, and a few key summons out of that school. Aether Gate is also an interesting one, although very, very high level, but if you don't have death, Aether Gate has the potential to boost you up death a little bit, because if you start with 1 level of death, it can give you an Aether Lord who potentially has 3 death, which helps out. In any case, I think that's going to be the end of this video. I guess the only other thing I would mention is Tartarian Gate, since we're looking at those. Tartarian Gate randomly gives you these Tartarians. Some of them are really good, some of them are not. They all come crazy and with afflictions, so they're hard to use effectively. Back in Dominions 3, Tartarian Gate used to be like the endgame spell of everyone. Hasn't been for a long time because they changed the way it worked. But as you can see, Tartarians get linked randoms and a lot of them. So, it can, if you desperately need magic, Tartarians are a consideration, especially because they're really gem cheap. you need to have high level death already, and it's Conjuration 9, so by the time you're casting this spell, the game has entered the end game phase. But it might be worth trying if you have a lot of death gems and a high level death mage. Only some of them are actually commanders. I think many of them arrive as units and you have to use Gift of Reason or something on them. But, I don't know. I've never cast Tartarian Gate myself. I've never really wanted to bother. It seemed like kind of a long way out of my way to go. But it is a potential option if you need a particular path, because they do get, you know, these high-level linked randoms that can potentially give you very high levels in a specific path without, you know, at a cost of only 10 death gems each. So, could be worth trying. In any case, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one when we get back into the game itself. Take care.